taking a quick swig. I couldn't find a Christmas mug in the house, so I pinched my daughter's Princess Aurora one. Hello everybody, Merry Christmas, good to see you all. Well, I can't see you, you can see me, but thanks for joining IFB and the team here as part of our IFB and Friends Look Forward to 2020. It's a little bit fun, but it's a little bit of thoughts about what we're going to see happening in the next 12 or so months in our sector, in the digital sector, and how that's going to affect our customers, both old and new, and how we're working with them and how we're moving forward with them in terms of services that we provide, services we're bringing online, but in real term, the problems that our customers are experiencing. So I won't read the slides out in detail. They'll be there for you afterward. We're recording the event. Thanks for your participation. Stacey, who runs all these events for us, is sat at home tucked up with a bit of a cold in Aberdeenshire, and she's going to be running the Q&A session as we run through the whole process. So if you get any points or any questions you want to ask the team as we go through it, and ourselves, stick it through in the Q&A stream and we can pick it up from there. And some of the things that you're going to hear about in the tech sector that we won't be speaking about today, but we thought were noteworthy, that are coming up in the next few months and over the next few weeks. NFTs, non-fungible tokens. I've heard a brilliant description of what they are. It's like having the original autograph and coding in the autograph that shows that you own that autograph and you have rights to it, rather than just right-clicking on an image on the internet and downloading it, and we can all share and enjoy that. But there's an ownership over what that photograph has and how that carries with you. Very difficult to do and very difficult to manage on the internet. So NFTs are one of these things that, and there's a great, I sent a video this morning we can share on the thread later. There's a great explanation involving Quentin Tarantino about what NFTs are when it comes to every frame of a Tarantino movie could be an NFT and monetized. But there's only a few frames that would be worth millions of dollars if they were monetized using NFTs, which rely on the blockchain to work. There's a little bit of code, like matrix code inside the image, and it uses the blockchain to detect when it's been used, and then people get charged for it. Digital twins is going to be a big thing, just because the power of data management, data AI, cloud computing, and connectivity. As we move into autonomous vehicles, we're going to need to have digital simulations of not just workplaces, but cities and economies, and that's been around for a while, but it's really going to come in and help you with business planning, certainly in the larger scale enterprises, more so than SMEs, as you can do much slicker real-time business planning and move from dashboard to real-time. Domestic and business robots, and these are not just physical robots, there's a bits of software as well. You're going to see much more joined up thinking between devices that previously have been in isolation to each other, and that will lead to smarter things. And a really powerful example of that just now that most of us are using. 5 or 10 years ago, we were all a little bit surprised or how well informed Google, when it would pop up, Google was and is, when it would pop up on your phone and tell you that you needed to leave now because of the traffic to get to your next meeting. On a Monday morning or a Sunday night, I've now got Outlook planning my week for me and suggesting gaps in my diary that I could take time out for self-time, but also looking at my team's diaries and saying, you've got time on Thursday to meet with George or Stacey. So those smart things, smarter things coming in round about are some of the things in the horizon that we'll cover off and we thought were worth chatting about today, but they really are real. And the theme for today is probably the second best Christmas movie of all time. And I suppose if you are of a generation, this is the movie that came on every Christmas year that you would sit down with the family and watch. The other one, well, the other one you can make up your mind. You might go through the Q&A session and vote for your favourite Christmas movie of all time, but this is the one that has the most emotion, certainly for me, and I have to say it was a bit easier to string through the course of events for today as well. We're going to speak about another movie at the end of this, but it'd be great to hear what your thoughts are on your favourite Christmas movie. And as I say, it's a bit of fun, and I hope you can enjoy the journey with us. So we're not in Kansas anymore. I mean, the definition of that when you step outside the Wizard of Oz is we're now in a place that's outside the norm. It's considered well outside the norm, and it's a place and circumstances that are uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And I'm sure that we can all resonate with that. We all recognise that the last 22 months have been uncomfortable and certainly unfamiliar. Different ways of working and living and commuting and thinking. We've seen a lot more guidance rather than compliance from government, and that's made things difficult. That means, how do you second guess what's going to happen next? And nobody could, to be fair to government of any colour or size. It's been just as difficult for them than it has been for us. But that guide between that thin line between guidance and compliance as a business owner has been very difficult for us to keep up with, because it can be interpreted a million different ways. And whereas compliance you have to comply with. So we're in that sort of state of flux now that we're going to see more compliance coming in off the back of working practices in places and how we use them. And we're relying on some of our friends. You know, Dorothy has a lot of friends, and we're relying on some friends to come through and help us through the next chat about the key things that we're talking about. One of our friends, long-time friend of IFB, has been Graeme, one of the directors at FG Burnett. And I would urge you afterwards, we'll share Graeme's message here. He was given a very short brief that we said to Graeme, we're not in Kansas anymore. What does that look like for the property market and the business property market and how people are using it? And he took that very simple brief and turned it into a very entertaining short story here that talks about industrial and office space, certainly with an Aberdeen flavour, because we're Aberdeen based and HQ'd, but we think that it rings through for any of our customers, really right now, anywhere where you're at in the world. So Graeme has given us a great flavour about how people are using office space and how they're using industrial space and what that need looks like continuing. And I've taken a short extract out of what Graeme has said in terms of we're quite similar minded in terms of where we're at as business leaders. We feel that turning your back on your traditional office space completely, or 2 days or 3 days a week, is not the way forward. Maybe it's a short-term fix, but if you forget about what Kansas looked like, you might forget some of your heritage and your history, which are great enablers for businesses. So you still need to keep that working environment. You still need to keep thinking about that working place that you've created as a business, because there's very few businesses that have started up in the pandemic. Most of us have ridden through it. So therefore, let's not forget our heritage and our history and how we've worked, but let's use this new way of working and what this new Kansas looks like, and develop that forward. And absolutely, from an Aberdeen point of view, we're seeing almost a third renaissance in Aberdeen's economy, which has a massive impact in the Scottish and the UK economy. We can talk about the politics about drilling for, and the ethics about drilling for fossil fuels and extracting for fossil fuels, but the knock-on effect in terms of what that does for logistics, engineering, science, technology, innovation across the UK has a massive effect, and it all comes from the Aberdeen postcode, or a lot of it comes from the Aberdeen postcode. So as we move into renewables, we move into mobile wind farming, as we move into hydrogen, all of these things have a big effect on industrial space use, but let's not affect the office use, which most of us are in. You know, and let's all join arms and be part of that team there. There's no doubt about it. When we're together, you know, when Dorothy was on her own, she didn't know which way to go. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know which direction of travel that she wanted to work into. She didn't know the story. She didn't know how to get on with it. But as she made an effort to go along that she needed to move, she met people along her way that she could help, and also they could help her. So as a team, that creativity, that problem solving really does happen exponentially when you're working as a team. Great productivity when you're in isolation and left alone and the phone's not ringing and people are not knocking on your door, but it doesn't lead to great creativity because people are very, very seldom creative in isolation. So don't forget about the benefits of bringing people together in your workspace. It is massively empowering for the people who work in your team, for your business, for your customers, your whole stakeholder environment in that space. So using your workspace differently, using other people's workspace differently. You might have come to the end of a lease or think about not renewing a lease or selling your property, or just don't need that much space, all that on a full-time basis as you did before. So work with others, work with partners, work with non-competing supply chain and work with customers and maybe utilise some of their space and maybe use that time when you're working in their space as touchdown space to be a little bit more creative with a supplier, with a partner, with somebody who you want to work with, but you really haven't managed to get that working yet. But think about how you use those spaces moving forward, and the investment you've put into bringing people together shouldn't be the same sort of investment in keeping people apart. It's a different thing. The challenge we have is that only 18% of employees recently surveyed want to return to the office full time, but 70% of employers believe that people should be back in the office full time. So how do we create and connect and bridge that problem and that gap that we've got there. That's something that is technology can help with. Like this, we can stream and we can conduct webinars, but nothing beats being in the room with people. Nothing beats joining arms with people around a problem or a solution, or celebrating success, or pulling someone along when things are not so great. Nothing beats that, in my mind, and maybe that's a generational thing, but I don't believe it is. So there's a bit of a disconnect there, and how do we use technology to help bridge that gap? There's lots of tools there that help. Talking about connectivity, so we've talked about that people, that spaces and places part. We're talking about the connectivity, and what we mean by that is how we connect people together digitally. And loosely, so bear with me in this one, okay? This is the one I had the biggest problem with. We're talking about Toto. Now, there's a few Totos that are going around just now. This guy here, and the meme of this is just fantastic. Regardless of what you think of the F1 result, Toto Wolff is a legend, just because he sounds more like Arnold Schwarzenegger than Arnold Schwarzenegger does, but also he's got a great point of view. So this is one of the best memes that I've seen forever. But it's not that Toto I'm on about, it's this Toto that I'm on about. Now, if you're a certain age, you remember Toto in Africa. You'll have heard it sung in karaoke bars everywhere, and every 1980s movie that had a love interest in it played Toto Africa. But they also had a song called Hold the Line, and that's the tenuous link between the Wizard of Oz and connectivity, the line part. So thanks for bearing with me. Of course, Toto was a scruffy little word-haired terrier in the movie, and hence he took his name from the band Toto. So that's where we've got to. Just take a quick sip of eggnog, obviously. So it's been a surreal journey for many of us. You know, we've all had to move from a well-catered environment. Many of us have had to move from a well-catered for, well-supported, well-connected and protected office environment to where I am at today. You know, I'm in the front room on one of the floors of my house, or the second floor of my house. So what we've had to rely on is connectivity that wasn't designed in real terms. Domestic broadband wasn't designed to carry the workloads that have been imposed on it in the last 22 months. But it has been brilliant. 5 years ago, this would not have happened. 5 years ago, with the video and the voice and the data demands that we've pushed onto the internet as a network and the broadband networks globally, this wouldn't have happened as successfully. There would have been a lot more dropouts, a lot more problems with connectivity, a lot less productivity. And that's got a lot of people thinking about how this now needs to change, because I'm sharing, or was sharing, my connection with my smart house with the kids and the rest of the family. So that had a knock-on effect about how I was working, and that did impact my productivity. And what that really means, and the things you should look out for in 2022, are not anything new, but the acceleration and access and ease of access and cost of access to full fibre. Massive investment in full fibre networks from new starts like City Fibre. We're an anchor partner with City Fibre in Aberdeen, and we're rolling our FTTP services out across Scotland with them. And what full fibre means is it gives you a future-proof connection. It's much more stable than copper. It usually offers much higher capacities, and you don't need to swap it out on a regular basis. But the future-proofing really means that you don't really need a copper phone line in your building anymore, whether it's at home or in business, because traditional broadband needs an analog line to support it. So full fibre modernises your business connectivity, and it gives you so many more options when it comes to video calls, higher capacity data, real-time experiences. If you want to join your offices up more, your work teams up in a better way, and you're going to move, I don't think AR or VR is going to have a massive effect in workspace. But you might get AR or VR rooms and shared office spaces that make you feel as though you're all stood together, like possibly the holodeck somewhere. Full fibre will enable that. But let's not discount mobile broadband. The mobile networks have stood up so well in the last 24 months also. And we're seeing 4G starting to be replaced by 5G. And it's agile and it's now reliable. You can depend on it as a business connection. And it's not, none of these things are perfect. You may be in an area that's in the centre of town or somewhere else that has poor connectivity just now, but it will get better. And mobile broadband is definitely a way forward, combined with fibre broadband, because wireless has to touch the ground at some point. That fibre networks are enabling better 5G connectivity, and we've been rolling out more 5G routers in the last 12 to 18 months than we've ever done before. And they're 4G and 5G compatible, but they're giving you download speeds of 200 meg, upload speeds of about 80 meg. more than enough to do this with just about anywhere where there's coverage. And that off-premise and hybrid means that you can use mobile 5G, mobile 4G, you can have private IP connections, so it's a private network, it doesn't really touch the public internet, so to say. So the stuff that we were doing with wired connections previously is now really happening and accelerating in our mobile network delivery. And you can sew all that together. You know, we're doing that on a regular basis for lots of our customers, which is really exciting for us because we're now not thinking about where they want to work, it's when they want to work. And the two go hand in hand in terms of anywhere and at any time. So moving that forward with fibre and mobile and mixing all that together with the traditional connectivity is an exciting place for us. Of course, we've got to think about the brave line or the not so brave line, and I think many organisations believe that they're doing great cyber security, but they need to move beyond that. The exploits that we've seen and the majority of exploits that are happening in the cyber world are really about people and networks, and that's because there's lots of connections out there and there's lots of people out there. And the attackers, and let's face it, cyber attackers are lawless, they're criminals. They're not bound by any country, and they're not bound by any laws or jurisdiction, they're lawless. And we're all law-abiding citizens, you know, so we are easily taken advantage of by somebody who is lawless and will stretch the realms of truth beyond where we would ever be. So phishing, taking exploits of, especially in this environment where George perhaps sends me an email and says, hey Graeme, I need to find some hardware in stock with a supplier. It's hardware we're going to be using in the next 6 months. I need you to transfer £100,000 to this account. Because we're all separate, and because we know that hardware is a problem, and because I trust George, if I'm not sharp on that, that money could be transferred and lost pretty quickly. So those type of activities in terms of phishing are becoming much more relevant and prevalent. And it's people, you need to prepare for that. It's about prevention rather than detection when it comes to those sort of spaces. And network intrusion, know what you've got, you know, understand well, people out of the office, what are they actually doing? What are they connected to? How are they connected? Are you making sure that that environment is contained and managed as best it can be? But the trust exploitation is the major thing for 2022. Make sure that you and your teams know what that looks like, know how they could be exploited. And there are lots of tests out there that you can activate emails that test your team's ability not to click on the download and so on. But sit down with your teams and have a conversation about how do you feel about cybersecurity? What are your thoughts on it? Are you nervous about it? Do you understand it? Do you understand what it means to be a bit more secure? And those conversations really will make a difference. So the trends that you're seeing are really in supply chain. And 2022 is going to be a big year for that because lots of people are now using apps that they weren't using 2 years ago. We've all been perhaps accelerated into using Teams the way we are now. We're seeing lots of other apps that are coming into that space because they were convenient and quick and ready to use. You're using new suppliers because you've had to think in different ways. But your supply chain is the main vector of attack that people will try and get into your business. If they're determined to get into your business, that's the main route. And you've got to make sure that your supply chain is as secure as you are. If they're more secure than you are, great, learn from your supply chain how they've managed to do that. But that remote working challenge is people having to make decisions in isolation, but also the acceleration that this lockdown has put on us and the pandemic has put on us. There's a lot of changes happened in the last 22 months. Have you got the right suppliers? And that, I'm not calling your suppliers into question, but how do you know that? How do you know you're up to their standard and they're up to your standard? And there's a few things going to go around that we think what you should look out for there. Education, bring your teams on board, bring yourself up to speed, but ask your suppliers, how well accredited are they when it comes to cyber security? What sort of insurance have they got if they're attacked or they're seen as a point of vulnerability, and then you're attacked through that sort of process as well. It's a really key point to be thinking about your purchasing and procurement routes. In Scotland, I think I'm right in saying that you can't tender for a piece of public sector contract work through the tendering processes unless you have a Cyber Essentials, and I think it may be plus accreditation. So that means that public sectors are already taking this right because we are all their supply chain. So why not build that into your procurement process? ISO 27001 and the other ISO standards around cyber security and data management and data security, they're great, but the average SME finds it difficult to keep up with that. So Cyber Essentials is a great starting point from in terms of accreditation, certainty, and security and certification. Build that into your procurement process, because cybersecurity is about supply chain, and it's the weakest or the strongest link in there that keeps everything together or makes it all fall apart. The recurring story about Walmart being exploited in the States and losing millions of customer records is because their air conditioning company was exploited, but not to exploit the air conditioning company, to get into the air conditioning systems that were monitored remotely, to then feed into the Walmart stores, to then go across that short bit of cable in a cupboard somewhere that brought them onto the Walmart network. And the rest, as I say, is history. So think about knowing what you've got in your environment as well. Do a regular scans. What does your environment look like? What hardware have you got out there? Are you sure it's there? Is it properly configured? How do you get it managed? What are the actions you need to take to make you as safe as you should be? But head for compliance, head for certification. It's part of the reason we're investing a lot of time, energy, money, and resources in our cybersecurity division just now, and going through IASME processes so we can help our customers become more secure and remain secure. So we want to become the driving instructor, not the examiner. We don't want to give you a certificate. We want someone else to do that, but we want to help you remain secure. And you need someone that you can trust in your supply chain that helps you with that. So telecoms, ding dong, the phone is dead, but we don't think it really is. You know, the push to stay in touch has led us to using Teams. I don't have a phone on my desk apart from my mobile, but I can make and receive calls. I've got voicemail, I've got all the things that I need to do in my business to enable me to function, for you to dial my DDI. 2 years ago, that was probably a big, 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, that was a big consideration and a big project for many companies. It's happened. So the cost and the challenge to migrate to this environment was usually down to handsets, usually down to cost of hardware. How do I replace that on my desktop phones to become internet ready or IP ready? But we've overcome that by using handsets, and we've made it work. So the cost inhibitor there about migration has been taken away by many of us. Coupled with that, what we've got is an analog line and an ISDN network closed down in 2025. So it's still a bit of time away. You're still a full 36 months away from that. But that means the phone line that's currently supporting your broadband won't be available to you in 2025. And the guys who are providing that, that's why we're moving to full fibre and better mobile broadband. But think about if you've got 3 or 4 sets of ISDN 30, because that's what you do, how do you migrate that? How do you get those numbers together? How do you collate that together? How do you plan about that to move it to an IP environment, a hosted voice solution, such as we provide, integration with Microsoft Teams, which we've been doing for a while now? What do you need to do for that whole estate planning before switch off happens? And again, switch off is not happening on a regional basis. And what I mean by that is, you know, Inverness is not going to switch off before central London, you know, and it's not going to be 2 years before. It's 2025 when this happens. So you've got plenty of time to plan it, but time, like everything else, will run out unless you use it effectively. But also, as you go through telecoms, think about the nudge that's coming from domestic users and consumers. WhatsApp is now more widely used for voice calls than Zoom or FaceTime or Facebook Messenger or any of these applications, as you can see there. And it's because it works. It's because it's reliable, it's cheap, it's free. You're not charged for the call, but it works and it's easy to use. WhatsApp are now using WhatsApp for Business. You should give it consideration, especially for a smaller organization. Does that work well enough for you? You can combine so many formats of communication on the WhatsApp app for business, and we're not in that space. We don't use that. There's no monetization for us in there, and we don't have customers asking for it. But think about the different technologies. Yes, Teams is great. Hosted voice is fantastic. We've been doing that for a long time, but think about the other technologies in there that may help you. So scoping is important. Know what you've got well before you need to move, but you're going to need to move if you've got analog phone lines in your business and you've got ISDN in your business. You're going to have to move off of that and chat about it early, talk through it early, scope it early, and work out what your migration plan is. And work on that migration plan to do it in a managed way, to do it in a way that doesn't disrupt the whole business, but maybe upgrades part of the business at a time. So you've got a fallback plan, but you can experiment and see how well these things work. And as part of your education, as you're rolling the new tool out, use the new platform that you're rolling out as part of your education process. Don't do it through PowerPoint. You know, don't use Skype to tell your teams about Teams. Use Teams to tell your teams about Teams. Get that user experience and user education up to speed, rocking and rolling right at the start of it. And then people will ask the right questions because they're being asked to push the right buttons or the wrong buttons. And the good thing is people still like to talk. So the phone is not dead, it's just changed shape quite dramatically. That brings us on to cloud, and obviously the cyclone that hit Dorothy, excuse me. I do hope you like the cup, and I hope my daughter's not watching. So the storm that hit Dorothy, the cyclone that hit Dorothy was just, overwhelming and landed in a different place that was full of opportunity, but a strange and weird land. We're not saying that that's what cloud is like, but in Scotland, Scotland lags behind the rest of Western Europe for cloud adoption within SMEs. That's up to 250 employees. There's lots of reasons around that. It's a lack of local provision. It's a lack of need and drive. We've got a lot of small companies in Scotland, but there's also a lack of education in that space. And that's a two-way thing, that lots of cloud providers are pushing product rather than being driven by a customer's need and a solution. So a recent survey from our customer base, 75% of our customers still have half of their workload on premise. And the main reason for that was they didn't know how to move it, but also they were still in contract for that pile of tin, hardware stack, server racks, and so on. But they thought cloud was a good idea, and it is a good idea, but they didn't know how to migrate there. So those conditions were roundabout for, take 50% of the data that's sitting in our customer base is still on premise. And the challenges that probably brought about during the pandemic, when everybody was in the office accessing the servers in the corner, all of a sudden everybody's at home, and that incoming demand for bandwidth and security and performance flipped a lot of designs on their heads. So what are you going to be doing in the next pandemic or disaster or next new way of working? And also we're looking at that in terms of cost. We know that that there might be a fixed operating cost in terms of just letting your server run there, and it's going to cost you £2.50 a day. But as soon as you start pulling and pushing data on it, if you've got a production server with a lot of CAD drawings in it and 100 of your team are using it, and that's sitting in some of the cloud providers like Microsoft or AWS, you've got an underlying cost to run that system, but then you're paying as data's coming in and out of that. And that really means that it ramps up in cost. It's not a fixed cost anymore, it's almost a utility cost. And that's the downside of utility. The more you horse it up, the more you use it, the more you demand into it, it will cost you more. So the predictable cost of cloud doesn't really mean, or doesn't really ring true for every cloud provider. So have a think about that just being on the cloud doesn't mean the costs will reduce. It might give you a fixed, a baseline cost, but the more you use it, the harder the cost is going to be. So where we're sitting there in terms of our customer base and the customers that we've spoken to in slightly wider market, migration, do you need to move? What is the driver and the need in your business to move? Usually for us, it's change, customer coming to the end of a contract for leasing hardware, maybe moving locations, or rooftop consolidation or expansion, change in license or software application in need. That's usually the need for migration, but have a well-planned migration and how it's going to work and work with a partner that can help you do that. Certainty, be sure that what you're moving to has got a fixed cost for the period you need it to operate in and how you need to operate. Not how the vendor needs to operate, because they've got a set of tools there that will tell you what it will cost. But ask them to justify that to you, or at least explain it to you, because usually, and what we've seen much of the time, is it's not as cheap as it seems to be as upfront. From our point of view, we do flat rate. What you've got the box, you can run the box, the VM, the VMs, the estates. It's flat out for as long as you want, and there's a fixed cost in that space. That doesn't suit everybody, because that might be a fixed cost that's higher than a meter tariff might be, pay as you go might be, but usually it works for our customer base. And then that hybrid model, because connectivity is really great now, really great, and because security is available to you to have some on-premise, some with IFB, some with Bright Solid or Azure or Microsoft, you can have that hybrid model that means you can move stale big data to a cheap location that you only need to access now and again, and data that you're needing and applications you need to use a lot of into a low cost but ready access location as well. And that's what we mean by hybrid in that space. So lots of problems just now. Where's the Tin Man? And without being too West Coast and you all, I think from our point of view, there is a real problem with hardware. And the hardware is come about because of a set of bad decisions and almost a perfect storm for the tech industry. Mining almost closed down, manufacturing almost closed down, manufacturing was hit with bad weather, fires in some of the Japanese plants, which I think constitute a massive percentage of some of the chip manufacturing. Right now, we're seeing 22 weeks from the point of ordering a semiconductor for that semiconductor to be delivered. So if you're buying a firewall from Palo Alto or Fortinet or Cisco through IFB, we're making that magic happen for you. From the point we order it, if it's not in stock, the chassis might be there, the components might be there, but the chip that makes it work, or the chips that are needed there, if they haven't been ordered before, it's going to be 22 weeks before that chip is ready. And by the time you build in production times, even either side of that, it's easy 6 months for some key bits of general use equipment and devices now coming into space. And some places are still not taking orders, and it's not going to get better until 2023. So bad decisions, bad luck, and an increase in demand. The motor industry closed down their plants, so therefore the plants that were servicing the motor industry and a lot of the industrial IT users that we deal with all focused on domestic usage, but you still can't get a PlayStation 5. And if you can, let me know. But the challenge in that space is 22 weeks ahead, 6 months of planning ahead to replace hardware. So that's holding back a lot of industries, it's holding back a lot of decision making, it's holding back a lot of projects. And you've got to be sure that you've got an eye on where you're going with this, because at the start of the pandemic, I'm pretty sure it was HSBC ordered something like 185,000 laptops. So they just swept the market away in the capacity that was in the market at that point. You're seeing that on a regular basis, that stock is not coming in anymore, it's just going straight to delivery. There's no pile up anywhere. So it's how you work about thinking about, you've got at least 6 months, a minimum of 6 months before you can get the hardware to deliver the projects that you want within your business. So how do you work with that, and how do you work with vendors? So building stock is a great idea if you can get your hands on it. But don't be reactionary. Don't, like back to the start of this, don't think about it as toilet roll. Don't pile them up cheap, right? Only buy it if you need it or you think you're going to need it in the next period. Try and extend the life of that stock as well, what you've got just now. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure that firmware's been well managed. Make sure that you've got a team and a supplier and a partner that works with you to make sure that your hardware estate is as functional and friction-free as possible, and any problems are being flagged as early as you can. Firmware's out of date in 10 months, so we really need to be thinking about that now. It's a non-supported box in the next year. We really need to be thinking about that now. But also buy wisely. Make sure that what you're onboarding is fit for purpose. Think about it this way, because there's at least a 6-month delay in chipsets just now, there'll be many versions of hardware that are sitting in brochures and online catalogs just now that won't be relevant in 6 months' time. So the manufacturers should be skipping a version of hardware or hardware variant coming forward. So don't get stuck with the one you looked at then, what's coming down the line. Because what you're going to be buying, what we'll all be buying is hardware that was always going to be obsolete by the time you bought it, because that's where hardware comes into. But that built-in obsolescence has got 6 months into it as well. So what's happening in that next stage? Because the technology manufacturers will want to get rid of that kit, those chassis, those motherboards, everything else that sits in it, to get to the next stage. And we shouldn't be really funding that. So have a think about how that works through for you. And data, good old scarecrow. Everybody's driven by data. Actually, I think we should all be driven by good, hard-working people. But they create data and they need data to do their job. So when you spin all that around, what are you doing with the data that you've got in your business and your organisation? And we know that that's become much more of a thing over the recent years. We've seen some great innovation centres spark up in Scotland from the Data Lab and SBRC that are all driven by what we do with data a lot better than we've ever done before, and that's for non-tech companies. So it's much more powerful analytics tools out there that are much more readily available off the shelf. And our engagement in the last period in terms of digital engagements with our customers has almost doubled. So that shouldn't surprise you, but the data that you're capturing from a Teams call or a webinar or a bot now that you might have been using on your website, because that's the right way to go. And how do you capture the information that a bot is collating about what people are asking you, consumers and customers are asking you on your website or your intranet? You can have a bot on your intranet. that's a great place for it to be. It's all about data management, data capture, and what you're seeing now with all these new habits formed by consumers, whether I'm a business consumer or a domestic consumer, I'm now consuming your product and how we interact in a different way. When's the next time you really want to see a salesperson come across your doorstep? If you're honest, yeah, it's great to interact with that space, but 9 times out of 10 now, you know, almost 10 times out of 10 over the last 24 months, our sales have been done like this. Our sales have been done virtually. So how do you learn from that? How do you take that data and intelligence and start turning that around to be customer friendly? How do you use the data you've got in your business to be customer friendly? So when you're going to see that rise of online platforms and purchasing in the business sector from 10% just now to 33% in 2030, you go, well, I think it'd probably be more than that. It's probably not, because there's still a phone call involved all the way through this. Who are the companies that are going to take advantage of that 23% increase? Are you going to be one of them? And are you going to use data to help you do that? And what we really mean by data is automation as a service. All this data that you're getting around, if you've got the right tools working for you, you're going to get the selling techniques, you're going to get the flags to buy, you're going to get the service and nodes, you're going to all these things around customer satisfaction, and you're going to get things that are going to happen in a much more automated basis. And the tools are not out there to help you with that much more. Dashboarding is a massive thing and it's been there for a while, but look how powerful Microsoft BI is now, and what we've all got at our fingertips with a little bit of training that can tell us about our business and what our business should and could be doing, what our trends are. You know, a report tells you what's happened, a dashboard can show you what's coming. And what you then should be doing with working with your teams and the smart people is turning that into key actions. Carbon reduction is going to be a massive thing that goes around data and AI for any size of business. And I personally think that the use of IoT and all these other things that go in there in terms of data management and data usage will give us much more predictability around our carbonization, as it's called. And we should be driven by that. You know, how many boxes are we ordering for routers this month? Well, it's going to be 50. Okay, how much cardboard does that mean? And where do we get that delivery from? You're already seeing that carbonization program with Amazon. Yeah, it's a convenience thing, but if I've got 5 orders with Amazon, the Amazon's app is now asking me to say, do you want all these delivered at the same time? Because that means 1 delivery, and that means less packaging, and it means, so all that lesser consumption helps us with our carbonization footprint. And there's going to be a lot of data available to small businesses as well as big businesses around that. And then that intangible value creation. It's a little bit like my mail client, your mail client may have the same. It tells me what I'm doing this week on a Sunday night. It tells me where my gaps are and what I could be using those gaps for. That's the use of data, very simple stuff. But that's the use of data that if you spread that across an organization, how many hours a week could that make you more productive in? There's a lot of dwell time around here, guys. Why is there dwell time? Well, I haven't used the calendar properly. Okay, well, let's use the calendar properly, but that dwell time could be used for creativity, R&D, product development, customer engagement. And that's where the intangible value from data is going to come and be much, much more relevant. And then instant decision making that you can book an appointment with me, I'm now free, it knows I'm free, can be used to monetize my time, and or a product's time or a services time. If you've got a digger that's down and you've got a queue of people waiting to buy the digger or lease the digger, that automatically told that's happening. So the driver who picks up that digger moves to the next one, and you reduce the friction in the transaction, and that will help. And that's going to be data driven as well as everything else. The biggest thing, and we're moving into the final stage now, and thanks for sticking with us. We need more monkeys, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. We use the word sales monkeys and tech monkeys, and if you're in the industry, you've heard that before. But currently in Scotland, and this is a rolling problem, there are 13,000 digital jobs in Scotland vacant on an annual basis. We produce under 2,500 computer science students, and half of those computer science students don't stay in Scotland because they're foreign students, and that's all good. That's where we're at. So we've got a huge, and not all of these 13,000 jobs are computer science generated. There will be cybersecurity jobs and digital marketing jobs and all these other related jobs that sit within the digital economy. So what do we do to help plug that gap? And that's just our industry. So what do we do to help plug that gap when education in Aberdeen, there are 3 secondary schools able to deliver higher computer science? And the challenge there is We're not turning kids on to our industry. We're not bringing them into cybersecurity. So what do we do as employers? And this is an employer problem because we need smarter people. We need more people doing more things, certainly in the digital space. And more companies are becoming more digital. You guys all know this. The demand for digital services in your business is exponential to where it was 2 or 3 years ago. So how do we overcome that? And that's a real challenge. So we reached out to one of our friends, who's Jude, not Judy Garland, but Judith Thorpe. She's a bit of a she clicks her heels quite often, but we won't go there. And I know she's not online just now. So she gives a great statement, very much like Graeme Burnett, Graeme Watt, very creative around the Wizard of Oz story. But the interesting fact here is that the number of jobs has reached a record high within Aberdeen. So that's overall job vacancies, and that's great to hear. And it's from startups all the way through to the large companies that we're working through there. And that's because a lot of people who've been in those roles have left the UK because of Brexit, because of EU workers who decided there's no place like home, and they've gone. Whereas Graeme Watt was thinking there's a great place to stay in Aberdeen, and Aberdonians tend to gravitate back here after colonising the world, obviously. So the challenge that we've got there is there are jobs out there. How do we make them digitally more interesting? How do we get the right skills into our organisations? How do we take advantage of things like modern apprenticeships? How do we change how we onboard people into our businesses? And only you can answer that. I mean, it's great help. We've had some fantastic help as a company from Skills Development Scotland, just sitting down and talking about our plans, thinking about what we could do and how we could do it, what the blockers are, but turning those into opportunities. How do we not necessarily recruit a graduate, but take in somebody and repurpose their skill set? Those are massively different ways for us as a small organisation to work, because we're a small team, but the investment in that gives us exponential opportunity as we move through the business. So the Q&A is still open if you want to join us, and that's us almost at the end of our journey. Thanks for sticking with us, and I can see there's quite a few people online, so thank you for that, and thanks for bearing with us as we go through it. The theme of the Wizard of Oz is it's a continual journey. It's not a dream, you know. It's something that we wanted to move through in terms of speak to you about this next year coming up is something that we've put a lot of effort into. You're going to see quite a major press release by IFB and a strategic partnership in Scotland before the end of the year. We wouldn't have done that a year and a half, 2 years ago, because we would have been a little bit too gruff. Our elbows would have been out a bit too much, and we wouldn't have realised what the opportunity is. So by collaboration, we're coming out with some interesting announcements late this year, early next year, and then into the middle of next year as well. And that's largely been driven by customer need and demand. And the only way we do that, the present that keeps giving, and this is my favourite Christmas movie, by the way. The Wizard of Oz is fantastic, but nothing beats Elf on a Christmas Eve bottle of mulled wine and a cigar. So the challenge that we've got there is we listen to our customers, and customer engagement's been great. And those of you who have taken part in our surveys, thank you. We'll ask you again. We'll try not to bore you to death with them, but that feedback has allowed us to spin up new services like Mobile 4G, our threat intelligence platform for cyber security, and also our cloud backup service. It doesn't matter where your data sits, it sits with it. We can back it up from almost anywhere that you're looking at. And then the advent of sort of Teams voice and better hosted voice solutions as we go through it. So thank you all for your time. I'm just going to try and pinch one of the questions here. One question that we've got here, just briefly, is about the reliability of 4G and 5G networks. And how much that's going to improve. I think you just need to look at the volume of investment that has got. That's our normal dress, by the way, in the screen there. That's how we all normally come to the office. But obviously we've put it on a little bit for working from home today. The mobile phone networks and the fibre networks have had massive investment, and very few of them are actually turning a profit to realise that investment. This year, 2022. Is when that happens. So you're going to see some and it's got to happen through customer adoption. Forget about digital transformation, it's about digital adoption. And that's driven by customer adoption. And what we mean by that is that service good enough to deliver what you need it to do? And when it comes to connectivity, mobile is now. If you've got the coverage, mobile is now. And that's the only thing we can really say in terms of mobile phone network. 2 years ago, we would have struggled with it, but we knew we needed to do something within it. And we did our homework and we got on the offer back sides, and we've created a service portfolio that is appealing to customers, and we're throwing a lot of those services out the door there. Okay, thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate what you've done and where you've been with us over the journey. This is coming into our 27th year of operation as an organisation, which is amazing. I obviously started when I was 6 years old, and the team here have been grateful for your business and looking after us and being joined in with us over that period. And we wish you to have a great, successful, happy and safe Christmas, and let's meet up in 2021. Thank you very much.